welcome to another video. As always, you've got Mr. Everything English, and today we are tackling poetry. One of the hardest elements, guys, of the English literature exam. If you look at the data, guys, every single year, the lowest scoring question is the question around poetry. Now, poetry, guys, is an interesting one. Why? Because I think a lot of students, they underestimate the layers of poetry and what you have to discuss when you are analyzing poetry. In English, guys, we have AO2, and AO2 is language, structure, and form. Now, language is the easy peasy one. Language is similes, metaphor, personification, alliteration, all that good stuff. It's the stuff that you're taught since you're in nappies. But as you get older and as you get through the years, for some reason, structure and form are not taught at the same level as language is, in my opinion. It's sometimes left too late, or the only things that are taught is long sentence, short sentence, long paragraph, short paragraph, and there's only so much you can do with those. Now, when it comes to poetry, imagine you have language, you have structure, and you have form. Now, language is talking about language devices or verbs, adjectives, nouns, and adverbs. That's that side. That is not what we are talking about in this video. What we are talking about in this video, guys, is the two things over here, form and structure. I'm going to give you 5 types of form that you should talk about when it comes to poetry, and 3 structural devices that you should talk about when it comes to poetry. Now, are there others? Yeah, there's loads. There's loads and loads and loads. If you Google forms of poetry, you're probably going to get 40 to 50 different forms. If you Google structural devices for poetry, you're probably going to get, again, loads and loads and loads. But that's not what we are here for. We have to make learning realistic. For the poetry question in your exam, you're looking to do 3 to 4 paragraphs in total. Let's say you do 2 paragraphs about language, and maybe the others you mix it up with form and structure. What does that mean? That means that we don't need to learn a gazillion types of forms and a gazillion types of structural devices. Now, you might say, sir, what if the ones that you teach us don't come up? Guys, we are preparing for GCSEs, and I promise you, if I am proven wrong, I'll shave my beard off. Guys, I promise you that the 3 structural devices that I am going to give you will come up in every single one of your poems, whether this be power and conflict or whether this be love and relationships. And the 5 types of forms that I'm going to give you will come up in every poem, whether this be power and conflict or whether this be love and relationships. And if you can prove me wrong, guys, then this beard will be coming off in the next video. Alright, guys, let's switch to the board and let's go over the form and structure for guys. So when we are looking at poetry, AO2, guys, assessment objective number 2 is looking at language, structure, and form. Now, I've already said, guys, we will not be looking at language in this video. We are looking at structure and we are looking at form. Now, guys, let's not waste time. When we are looking at structure, there are 3 things that I would like you to speak about. Number 1, guys, I would like you to speak about something called a volta. Number 2, guys, I would like you to speak about something called caesura. And number 3, guys, I would like you to speak about something called enjambment. 1, 2, and 3. Now, every single poem that you read in the love and relationship section and in the power and conflict section will have one of these 3 inside it. Pretty much all of them have all of them inside it. So, what is a volta? Guys, what is a volta? A volta, guys, is a shift. It's the turning point in the poem. And it's not a basic shift, it's a significant shift. But this could be any shift. It could be a shift in tone, it could be a shift in setting, so long as it's impactful. So, for example, guys, the poem can go from being angry to calm, from happy to sad. These are all shifts in the poem. An example, guys, for example, is in the poem The Prelude. When the guy is on the boat and he's sailing away, thinking he's all powerful, thinking he is the man, the moment he sees that peak and he goes from being powerful and in control to being weak and anxious. That is the volta, that is the shift, that is the turning point in the poem. So when you have a shift in a poem, when you have a turning point in a poem, this is known as the volta. Number 2, guys, we have caesura. This is when you have punctuation in the middle of the line, but I don't mean literally the middle. Don't get a ruler and start measuring the middle of the line. It just means when there's punctuation throughout the line and not at the end of the line. So when you have a line of poetry and at the end there's no full stop, there's no comma, there's no exclamation mark, there's no bracket, and instead the punctuation that normally goes at the end, when this is somewhere else in the line, this is known as caesura. Now, what's the effect? Normally, guys, the effect of this, it shows emotion, because caesuras indicate irregular pausing. For example, in the poem My Last Duchess, when the Duke is talking, guys, when the Duke is talking, he uses a lot of caesura. Why? Because he's angry. And when people are normally angry, they pause when they wouldn't normally pause, because it shows that the emotions are heightened. And finally, guys, we have enjambment. Enjambment. Now, what is this? Guys, this is when you have no punctuation at the end of a line. Guys, this is when you have no punctuation at the end of a line and the line carries on to the next one. There's no comma, there's no full stop, there's no exclamation mark, there's nothing, and the line simply carries on. Guys, I promise you, these 3 will always come up in your exam. Now you may think, and you may wonder now, guys, sir, what's the effect of enjambment? Guys, to understand the effect of enjambment, what you have to do is this. Look at the end of the line where there's enjambment, so where the line carries on. Look at the end of the line and look at the line that's below it. And think about what's the connection between the ending of this line and the beginning of the line beneath it. Because the reason there's no punctuation is because that line is now connected to the next line. And think about what is happening here. Now, guys, I must put a disclaimer. Volta is effective because it's normally the main turning point. However, some poems have 10 different examples of caesura and enjambment. Not every single caesura, not every single enjambment is effective. So don't just go to the poem and look for, okay, no punctuation there, but there's punctuation throughout, that's caesura, I'm gonna use that. It doesn't work like that. You have to read the question. Then you have to think about, okay, which part of the poem where this is being used has the most effect, depending upon how it's used, the context around it. But I repeat, guys, the 3 structural devices that you need to know when it comes to poetry is volta, caesura, and enjambment. And I repeat, guys, of course there's more. But I am only giving you these 3. Then we move on to form. Guys, then we move on to the forms of poetry. I'm going to give you guys the very simple, easy peasy forms that will always come up. I'm not going to give you haikus or rhyming couplets. That's a bloody waste of time. I'm going to give you the 5 that we need that will always be apparent in your exam. Number 1, guys, I want you all to look at a narrative poem. A narrative poem, guys, is simply a poem that tells a story. That's it. It's a poem that tells a story. You can argue the poem, guys, Climbing My Grandfather, is a poem about the story of this child's relationship with his grandfather. Number 2, guys, you can look at an epic poem. An epic poem is a poem that is about an event. This could be like a poem like Bayonet Charge or Charge of the Light Brigade, because these are poems that are about events. They're about battles. They're about war. Then, guys, we have dramatic monologue. Now, a dramatic monologue, guys, is a poem where there's one speaker written in the first person and there's one person talking the whole way through. These poems are normally biased and they are normally one-sided. This is, for example, My Last Duchess. Next, guys, we have a sonnet. And a sonnet is a 14-line poem and it's normally about love. But this love doesn't have to be romantic. This can be different types of love. For example, the poem Ozymandias, this is a sonnet. However, Ozymandias has not got no chick that he's in love with. Instead, Ozymandias is in love with himself, and more importantly, he's in love with power. So that is how you can link it to the idea of a sonnet. Now, if you're in your exam and you're scratching your head because you can't find narrative, you can't find epic, you can't find dramatic monologue, and you can't find sonnet, what do? Your backup plan, guys, is a free verse poem. A free verse poem is a poem that doesn't really have any rules. For example, Checking Out Me History. Checking Out Me History, guys, is a poem that doesn't really follow a structure. There's no really stanza consistency. The writer does whatever they want. This is a free verse poem. Now, one important thing that I must inform you guys. One poem can be more than one form. For example, the poem Prelude. That could be a narrative poem, that could be an epic poem. What you have to do is on the day of your exam, read the question. And that's how you want to link it. That's how you choose your form. For example, if your question is, compare how war is presented in Bayonet Charge and Light Brigade, I would personally lead to an epic poem, because an epic poem is about wars, is about events. But you pick depending upon the question you are given. All right, guys, that's the structure of poetry. That's the form of poetry. And that's it. You are set for your exam. Of course, you can go and learn more. But I'm giving you what I think are easy to pick up and move with. Now, remember, guys, it's not what you pick. It's how you discuss them, how you explain the effect. Because that is what AO2 looks at. AO2 looks at how you analyze the effect of language, structure, and form. So don't just get happy, guys. Don't get gassed thinking, yep, I got this. I'm going to pick Volta. It depends what you do with it. I'm going to pick dramatic monologue. That's great. But what are you going to do with it? Make sure you explain the effect of these, linking everything back to your point, which will hopefully answer the question. All right, guys. As always, thank you for your support. I hope you found the video beneficial. It's been Mr. Everything English. Peace.